Imagine going to work, say on a Tuesday. You're answering emails, you're smiling at the coworker in the cubicle next to you, while internally, your entire world has just collapsed.
Yeah.
To the person next to you, it's just a completely normal morning. I mean, they have absolutely no idea.
Right.
But to you, the future you were planning has just completely vanished. So today, we are doing a deep dive into a really deeply hidden human experience. And our starting point is actually, well, it's a bit unusual.
It is.
We're pulling from an informational brief from Coping and Healing Counseling, which is a telehealth therapy practice.
Usually referred to as CHC.
Right, CHC. And if you just glance at this document, I mean, it looks like standard healthcare logistics,
Yeah, insurance networks.
Insurance networks, clinical models.
Contact info, all the administrative stuff.
Exactly, the dry stuff. But woven right into the center of this structural paperwork is this profound, incredibly articulate examination of pregnancy loss.
It creates this fascinating contrast,
Yeah.
You're reading the mechanics of how to book a telehealth session.
Right.
And suddenly you are confronted with this sharp, deeply empathetic breakdown of a highly specific type of mourning. I mean, it shifts you out of that administrative mindset immediately.
Completely. And there's one particular line that captures that shift perfectly. It's really the hook for everything we're going to explore today. The quote is simply, "Nobody sent flowers." That's the part that keeps coming up.
Wow. What a heavy, vivid observation.
Yeah.
It really encapsulates the core friction of this experience.
Just sitting with that visual for a second, I mean, we are so conditioned to recognize grief when it's loud, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
when someone loses a parent or a spouse, there is a visible social infrastructure.
Exactly. There's a script.
You had a script.
Yeah.
There are casseroles showing up on the porch. There are sympathy cards. People wear dark clothes.
HR gives you bereavement leave.
Right. Your job actually acknowledges it. But the mission of our deep dive today is to examine what happens when grief is completely hidden. We want to understand how invisible loss actually manifests in a person's life. And crucially, what frameworks exist to process that pain when society essentially just, looks the other way.
Well, and that lack of societal acknowledgement is the precise mechanism that turns a painful loss into an isolating trauma.
Yeah.
Because when we look at the anatomy of invisible loss, whether the experience was a miscarriage, a stillbirth, or a very early pregnancy loss, the traditional communal rituals of mourning are they're gone.
They don't exist.
Right. They don't exist. There's no memorial service to gather around. The neighbors don't know.
Yeah.
And often, as you mentioned with the Tuesday morning example, the people you spend 40 hours a week with have no idea anything has happened.
Right. You are carrying this massive, crushing weight, but the outside world is reflecting absolute normalcy back at you.
And that creates a profound psychological dissonance. When the external world doesn't validate a loss, the individual carrying it privately begins to question their own internal reality.
Oh, wow.
They start wondering if the sheer size of their devastation is somehow incorrect or, disproportionate.
Like they're doing it wrong.
Exactly. The internal monologue becomes, why am I struggling to function when no one around me seems to think a tragedy has even occurred?
Okay, let's unpack this, because that specific dissonance between a shattered internal world and a completely silent external world, that is exactly where the well-meaning yet totally devastating comments come in.
Oh, the comments. Yes.
The brief specifically highlights the moment when someone tries to offer comfort by saying, at least you know you can get pregnant.
Which is meant to offer a silver lining. I mean, people say it trying to be helpful.
Right.
But functionally, it completely invalidates the current reality.
It really does. It makes me think of an analogy. Saying at least you can get pregnant right after a loss. It's like walking into someone's house and seeing their massive picture window completely shattered.
Just glass everywhere.
Glass everywhere, sharp, dangerous glass covering the living room floor. And you hand them a tiny piece of clear Scotch tape.
Wow.
And you say, hey, at least this tape will fix the draft.
Yeah.
But it completely ignores the massive pile of broken glass they are standing in. You aren't fixing the problem. You are profoundly misunderstanding what has actually been broken.
The tape doesn't acknowledge the glass.
Exactly.
That is an incredibly accurate way to visualize the disconnect, and the document captures the reality of that comment so well, it says it lands like a door closing.
Like the door closing, yeah.
What's fascinating here is how the text provides this profound psychological validation right after describing that closed door. It states, and I think this completely reframes the conversation, it says grief tracks attachment, not gestational weeks.
Wait, grief tracks attachment, not gestational weeks.
Yes.
That line just stopped me cold.
Because it challenges the way society fundamentally measures the validity of a loss. Culturally, we tend to weigh grief on a scale of time.
Right.
Like, how many years were you married? How long did you know that friend? Or in this context, how many weeks along was the pregnancy?
We want to put a number on it.
Exactly. We try to quantify pain using a medical statistic. But human neurobiology and psychology, they just do not work like that. You aren't grieving a statistic. You're grieving a future that your brain had already started building.
So the timeline doesn't dictate the depth of the pain.
Not at all. I mean, the moment an attachment forms, your brain begins mapping out a new reality.
Wow. Yeah.
You start envisioning the nursery, the holidays, the shifted family dynamic, and when that is suddenly lost, the deletion of that entire envisioned future is absolute.
Regardless of the weeks.
Regardless of whether it happens at 6 weeks or 30 weeks. The grief is tethered to the attachment, not the calendar.
And when you are grieving a future that never gets built, especially without those societal rituals we talked about, the casseroles and bereavement leave,
Right.
that suppressed grief doesn't just evaporate. It leaks into the present day in really unexpected ways, which kind of brings us to the ripple effects on daily life. There are these complex emotional landmines waiting for people.
The dread surrounding dates is a major one.
Yes, the calendar becomes a total minefield. The due dates, the anniversaries of the loss. I mean, these are dates that you never actually planned to have to remember in this context.
You wanted to buy a birthday cake.
Right, you wanted to buy a birthday cake, not silently mark a trauma on a random Tuesday.
Yeah.
And then there are the complex social dynamics. The text brings up the sheer difficulty of being around other people's pregnancies or attending baby showers.
Which, clinically speaking, is a highly logical protective response. It makes complete sense.
But the immediate aftermath of that protective response is this incredibly heavy guilt.
Oh, the secondary guilt is massive.
You feel terrible that you can't just be purely happy for your best friend or your sister. So you are carrying the initial grief of the loss, and then you are carrying a secondary burden of guilt for how the grief is forcing you to behave. It's just exhausting.
It is a compounding emotional tax,
Yeah.
and it rarely stays confined to the individual. The material explicitly calls out the severe relational strain this creates.
Yeah.
It details how partners often grieve on entirely different timelines, leaving them completely out of sync with one another.
Okay, I have to push back on this a little bit, or at least ask for clarity here.
Sure.
If a couple goes through this together, right, experiencing the exact same medical event at the exact same time, why does the grief timeline fracture their relationship instead of uniting them?
That's a very fair question.
Like, wouldn't living through the same tragedy put them perfectly in sync?
You would think so, but the mechanism behind that fracturing ties directly back to what we established earlier about the lack of societal rituals.
Oh, interesting.
Think about how we handle other losses. When society provides a blueprint, like a funeral,
Right.
everyone has a role. There is a eulogy, there's a burial, there's a reception. We move through the prescribed steps together.
We know what to do.
Exactly. But because society offers absolutely no blueprint or public script for pregnancy loss, there's no shared roadmap. So both partners are suddenly forced to invent their own coping mechanisms in a complete vacuum.
Oh, I see. So without a guide, they just default to their most basic survival instincts.
Precisely. And human survival instincts vary wildly.
Yeah.
One partner might cope intuitively. They need to talk about the loss constantly. They need to cry. They need to process the attachment outwardly.
Right.
But the other partner might cope instrumentally. They compartmentalize, they throw themselves into work, or they try to fix things around the house just to regain some sense of control over a chaotic universe.
So they are handling it completely differently.
Yes. They are both grieving the exact same loss, but because their methodologies are so polarized, partner A thinks partner B is callous and doesn't care. Wow. And partner B thinks partner A is spiraling and won't move on. This vacuum of shared processing is exactly why specialized couples work is so critical here.
That makes perfect sense. I mean,
Yeah.
they're just speaking different languages of grief.
Exactly.
And we also have to factor in the physical reality mentioned in the source material, because this isn't just an emotional bereavement. For many, there are genuine trauma symptoms resulting from the medical experience of the loss itself.
Absolutely.
The sheer panic, the emergency room visits, the physical pain, that leaves a real physiological imprint.
The distinction between grief and trauma is vital here.
Okay.
Grief is an emotional processing of what is lost. Trauma is a physiological nervous system response.
Right.
When someone experiences a sudden, medically frightening event, the amygdala, which is the brain's threat center, can essentially get stuck in an active fight or flight loop.
Just constantly on high alert.
Exactly. You cannot effectively process emotional sadness if your nervous system still feels like it is actively in danger.
Wow. Which means standard talk therapy might not be enough.
Often it isn't.
You need something highly specific. And that transitions us perfectly into the next major concept.
Okay.
Since society is not providing a built-in container or a roadmap for this deeply complex biological and psychological grief, people have to intentionally build one.
Yes.
And this leads right into the clinical structures outlined by coping and healing counseling.
They lay out a very intentional framework that mirrors the exact complexities we just discussed. They delineate their approaches based on what the specific patient needs.
Right.
So there is grief-focused therapy that explicitly operates on a, quote, does not rush you timeline.
Which is so important.
It is. Then there's trauma-focused work targeting the physiological panic of medically frightening losses. And as we noted, dedicated couples work to help those out-of-sync partners build a shared vocabulary.
I noticed they also highlight perinatal mental health support as its own distinct clinical specialty.
Yep.
To put this in perspective, it would be like, well, if you had a very complex specific heart condition, you wouldn't just go to your general practitioner.
No, you'd seek out a cardiologist.
Right. Perinatal mental health is an entire specialized field designed to understand this exact intersection of biology, psychology, and reproduction.
And that specialization removes a massive burden from the patient.
How so?
Because when you see a generalist for perinatal loss, you might spend 5 sessions just educating the therapist on the terminology.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that.
Or trying to explain why a miscarriage feels different or why a baby shower is such a trigger.
Right, you're doing all the work.
Exactly. But with a perinatal specialist, the clinician already knows the landscape. The patient doesn't have to be the tour guide of their own tragedy. They can just focus on healing.
So what does this all mean for the person listening right now? I think it boils down to a massive paradigm shift in how we view the threshold for seeking help.
I completely agree.
The entire philosophy of this practice is crystallized in one sentence from the material, and it says, you do not need to be in crisis to deserve a place to put this.
Such a powerful statement.
We have this cultural habit of waiting until we are completely non-functional.
Right, until things fall apart.
Exactly. Until our relationships are ending or we literally can't get out of bed before we finally ask for help. But this establishes that you don't have to hit rock bottom to deserve a container for your grief. Just having a heavy burden is qualification enough.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of mental health care, CHC's entire infrastructure is really built around comprehensive support.
Yeah.
The brief details a diverse, culturally competent team of 15 or more licensed therapists, and they list a spectrum of credentials: LCSWs, LPCs, LMFTs.
Wait, let's decode those acronyms for a second, because healthcare alphabet soup can be really intimidating.
Absolutely, can be overwhelming.
So what are we looking at there?
Well, they represent different clinical lenses. So an LCSW, or licensed clinical social worker, that professional often looks at the individual within their broader environment and support system.
Right, looking at the whole picture.
Yes. Then an LTC, a licensed professional counselor, focuses deeply on individual psychological and cognitive patterns.
Got it.
And an LMFT, a licensed marriage and family therapist, specializes in the relational dynamics between people.
Oh, I see.
So by having all of these under one roof, they can really tackle an issue from multiple psychological angles.
And they apply those lenses to a wide demographic, too. I mean, the document notes they offer individual therapy, teen therapy starting at age 13,
Right.
family counseling, and even life coaching.
It really reflects an understanding that healing is not entirely linear.
Yeah.
Someone might come in needing acute trauma processing after a medical emergency, but maybe 6 months later, they might transition to life coaching to figure out how to reintegrate into their career with their new perspective. It's really a holistic ecosystem of care.
But, and this is the massive roadblock we really have to acknowledge, finding this level of specialized, culturally competent care is usually where the system just breaks down entirely.
It is the biggest bottleneck.
Right. It's wonderful that perinatal trauma specialists exist, but historically, getting access to one feels like scaling a fortress.
It really does.
It is logistically difficult, it is incredibly expensive, and when you are already running on fumes from grieving, I mean, hitting just one administrative wall is enough to make you give up.
The friction of access is the great filter in mental health.
The great filter, yeah.
Because if a grieving parent has to call 5 different clinics, figure out complex out-of-network deductibles, and then commute an hour each way in Atlanta traffic just to cry in an office,
They just won't do it.
they simply won't go. The system's friction keeps them isolated.
Which brings us to how the source material addresses those exact barriers. The delivery model here isn't just a logistical detail. It actually feels like an extension of their clinical empathy.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
It is 100% telehealth.
Yeah.
These are HIPAA compliant, secure video sessions.
And telehealth is uniquely suited for this kind of hidden grief.
Really?
How so? Well, grief often makes people want to retreat, right?
Yeah, you just want to hide under the covers.
Exactly. The thought of putting on appropriate clothes, driving somewhere, and sitting in a public waiting room can be a massive deterrent.
That makes a lot of sense.
By utilizing telehealth, the clinician is meeting the patient exactly where the grief lives, which is often right in their own living room or even from their head.
Right.
Furthermore, they serve all 159 counties in Georgia. You don't have to live in a major metropolitan hub to see a specialist anymore.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because geographic access is only half the battle.
True.
The financial accessibility outlined in this brief is just staggering. For Medicaid patients, the copay is $0.
Wow.
And for major commercial plans, they list Aetna, Cigna, BCBS, UHC, Humana. The cost typically ranges from just $10 to $40 a session.
When you look at the broader landscape of specialized mental health care, those numbers represent a radical shift.
It is a complete systemic intervention. I mean, when you combine a $0 Medicaid copay with statewide telehealth access, you are actively dismantling the two highest walls around mental health care.
The money and the commute.
Exactly. The
Yeah.
financial burden of the session and the logistical tax of getting there. You are taking highly specialized grief and trauma care, which has historically functioned as an elite privilege for those who can afford high out-of-pocket fees.
Right.
And you are creating an accessible baseline.
By removing the compounding trauma of financial stress, the clinic basically allows the individual's central nervous system to relax enough to actually do the emotional work.
Yeah, you aren't sitting there staring at the clock worrying about what this hour is going to cost you.
Precisely. And the text emphasizes that this low-barrier philosophy extends to the very first interaction. There isn't some grueling, overwhelming diagnostic intake. The promise is that a licensed clinician will simply, quote, listen first and go from there.
Listen first and go from there. It completely de-escalates the pressure.
It does.
You don't have to have your trauma perfectly articulated. If someone listening feels like they are holding this invisible weight alone, the infrastructure coping and healing counseling is built makes reaching out incredibly simple.
You don't have to navigate a maze.
No, not at all. The website is justcaretherapy.com. You can email support at justcaretherapy.com or just dial 4004-832-0102. It's just built to remove the friction of getting help.
It is genuinely rare to see an organization that understands the profound emotional nuance of a highly specific pain point while simultaneously dismantling the systemic, practical barriers to treating it.
It really is the bridge between deep empathy and practical action. We began this deep dive by looking at the missing rituals, the silence of the external world, and the immense isolation of pregnancy loss. We explored how that invisible pain ripples out, fracturing relationships and leaving real trauma in the body. But ultimately, we uncovered how frameworks like CHC provide the container that society just failed to build.
And as we bring this analysis to a close, I want to leave the listener with a broader application of these concepts.
Okay.
The text anchors itself on that profound truth we discussed, that grief tracks attachment.
Right.
And it got me thinking about the underlying mechanics of that idea. If grief is simply the shadow of attachment, I would ask everyone listening to consider what other invisible attachments we hold in our own lives.
Oh, wow.
We form deep psychological attachments to career paths that suddenly vanish. We attach ourselves to unfulfilled dreams we have to quietly let go of, or to shifted identities we once held dear before life changed our trajectory.
Yeah.
How many of those internal attachments might also be causing us unacknowledged grief right now, simply because society hasn't given us a formal ritual to mourn them?
That is a phenomenal question. When there is no public script, no gathering, and no one knows to send flowers, how do we honor the invisible futures we've lost? Something to mull over.